Then, when it was the 23rd night, she continued, I have heard, O auspicious king, that the hunchback started to talk to Shams al-Din, the father of the bride, saying, May God curse the man who was the cause of this. Get up, said Shams al-Din, and come out. Do you think that I am mad, said the hunchback, that I should go with you without the Ifrit's permission? He told me to come out and leave at sunrise. So has the sun risen or not, for I can't come out of here until it has. Shams al-Din then asked who had put him there. I came here last night to relieve myself, the man replied, and suddenly a mouse came out of the water and squeaked, and then it went on growing bigger and bigger until it was as large as a buffalo. It spoke to me in tones that rang through my ears, after which it left me and went away. May God curse the bride and the man who married me to her. Shams al-Din went up and removed him from the latrine, after which he ran off, not believing that the sun had risen, and going to the Sultan, he told him what had happened to him with the Ifrit. As for Shams al-Din, the bride's father, he went back in a state of perplexity, not understanding what had happened to his daughter, and he asked her to explain the matter again. She replied, The bridegroom, for whom I was unveiled yesterday, spent the night with me, took my virginity, and has made me pregnant. If you don't believe me, here is his turban, in its folds, lying on the chair, and here are his other clothes underneath the bed, with something wrapped up in them, although I don't know what it is. On hearing this, her father came into the alcove, where he found the turban of his nephew, Hassan. He took it in his hands, turned it over, and said, This is a vizier's turban, and it is of muslin. He then looked and saw an amulet sewn into the tarbush, which he took and opened, and he picked up the outer clothes, in which he found the purse containing the 1,000 dinars. Opening it, he found inside it a sheet of paper, which he read and which turned out to be the Jew's contract of sale, with the name of Badr al-Din Hassan, the son of Nur al-Din Ali, the Egyptian. He also found the 1,000 dinars. On reading the paper, he uttered a loud cry and fell down in a faint. When he recovered and grasped what this all meant, he was filled with wonder and exclaimed, There is no God but God, who has power over all things. Then he said, Daughter, do you know who it was who deflowered you? No, she replied. It was my brother's son, your cousin, he said, and these 1,000 dinars are your dowry. Glory be to God, but I wish I knew how this came about. Then he reopened the amulet, and in it he found a note in the handwriting of his brother Nur al-Din. After looking at his brother's handwriting, he recited, I see the traces they have left and melt with longing, and I pour down my tears over their former dwellings. I ask the one who afflicted me with separation that one day he might favor me with their return. On finishing these lines, Shams al-Din read through what was in the amulet, and there he found the date of Nur al-Din's marriage to the daughter of the vizier of Basra, its consummation, the date of Hassan's birth, and an account of Nur al-Din's life up until the time of his death. This astonished him. He trembled with joy and, on comparing what had happened to his brother with his own history, he found that they matched exactly, that the consummation of his marriage and that of his brother had happened on the same date, as had the birth of Hassan and that of his own daughter, Sit al-Huzn. Taking the paper, he brought it to the Sultan and told him all that had happened from start to finish. The astonished Sultan ordered that an account of this should be written down immediately. Shams al-Din waited, expecting his nephew to come, but he did not come that day, or on the next, or on the third, and after 7 days had passed, there was still no news of him. So Shams al-Din said, By God, I shall do something that no one has ever done before, and taking an inkwell and a pen, he produced on a piece of paper a sketch plan of the whole house, with the alcove here, such and such a hanging there, and so on, including everything in the house. He then folded the paper and gave orders for all Hassan's things to be collected. He took the turban, the tarbush, the mantle and the purse, which he locked up in his own room with a lock of iron, setting a seal on it to await his nephew's arrival. As for his daughter, at the end of the months of her pregnancy, she gave birth to a boy, splendid as the moon, resembling his father in beauty, perfection, splendor and grace. The midwives cut the umbilical cord, spread kohl on his eyelids, and then handed him over to the nurses, naming him Ajib. In one day he grew as much as other children grow in a month, and in a month as much as they do in a year. When he was 7 years old, he was handed over to a teacher who was told to give him a good education and to teach him to read. He stayed at school for 4 years, but he began to fight with the other children and abuse them, saying, "Which of you is my equal? I am the son of Shams al-Din of Egypt." The other children went together to the monitor to complain of his rough behavior. The monitor told them, "When he arrives tomorrow, I'll teach you something to say to him that will make him give up coming to school. Tomorrow, when he arrives, sit around him in a circle and say to each other, 'By God, no one may play this game with us unless he can tell us the names of his mother and father. Anyone who doesn't know these names is a bastard and won't be allowed to play.'" The next morning, they came to school, and when Ajib arrived, they surrounded him and said, "We are going to play a game, but no one may join in with us unless he can tell us the names of his mother and father." They all agreed to this, and one of them said, "My name is Majid. My mother is Alawiya and my father is Al-Din." A second boy did the same, and so did the others until it came to Ajib's turn. He then said, "My name is Ajib. My mother is Sit al-Huzn and my father is Shams al-Din of Egypt." "By God," they said to him, "Shams al-Din isn't your father." "Yes, he is," insisted Ajib, and at that the boys laughed at him, clapped their hands, and said, "He doesn't know who his father is. Go away and leave us. We will only play with those who know their father's name." At that, the children around him went off laughing and leaving him angry and choked with tears. The monitor told him, "We know that your grandfather, Shams al-Din, is not your father but the father of your mother, Sit al-Huzn. As for your own father, either you nor we know who he is. The Sultan married your mother to the hunchbacked groom, but a jinni came and slept with her, and you have no father we know of. You won't be able to compare yourself with the other boys in this school unless you find out who your father is, for otherwise they will take you for a bastard. You can see that the trader's son knows his father, but although your grandfather is Shams al-Din of Egypt, as we don't know who your father is, we say that you have no father. So act sensibly." When Ajib heard what the monitor and the boys had to say and how they were insulting him, he went away immediately and came to his mother, Sit al-Huzn, to complain, but he was crying too hard to speak. When she heard his sobs, her heart burned and she said, "What has made you cry? Tell me." So he told her what he had heard from the children and from the monitor, and he asked her, "Who is my father?" She said, "Your father is Shams al-Din of Egypt." But he said, "Don't tell me lies. Shams al-Din is your father, not mine, so who is my father? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill myself with this dagger." When his mother heard him talk of his father, she burst into tears, remembering her cousin Hassan, and how she had been unveiled for him, and what he had done with her. She recited these lines: "They stirred up longing in my heart, and left. Those whom I love have now gone far away. They left, and with them has my patience gone. After this loss, patience is hard to find. They left, and were accompanied by my joy. Nothing stays fixed, there is no fixity. By leaving me, they brought tears to my eyes, and thanks to this, my tears flowed down in floods. I yearn to see them, and for long I have been yearning and awaiting them. I call up pictures of them, and my inmost heart is home to passion, longing and to care. Your memory has now become my cloak, and under it I wear my love for you. Beloved, for how long will this go on? How long will you stay distant and shun me?" She wept and wailed, as did Ajib, and at that point suddenly in came Shams al-Din. When he saw their tears, his heart was burned and he asked what was the reason for all this grief. Sit al-Huzn told him what had happened to Ajib with the boys at his school, and Shams al-Din himself wept, remembering his brother and what had happened to the two of them, as well as what had happened to his daughter, the real truth of which he did not know. He then immediately got up and went to the court, where he came into the Sultan's presence, and told him his story, asking leave to travel to the east in order to make inquiries about his nephew in Basra. He also asked the Sultan to give him written instructions addressed to all lands, allowing him to take his nephew with him wherever he might be found. He then burst into tears before the Sultan, who was moved with pity for him and wrote him the orders for which he had asked. This delighted Shams al-Din, who called down blessings on his master, and then took his leave. He immediately went home and made his preparations for the journey, taking with him all that he, his daughter, and Ajib might need. They traveled day after day until they arrived at Damascus, which they found full of trees and watered by streams, as the poet has described it. I passed a day and a night in Damascus, and time swore that with a city like this it could make no mistake. I spent the night while night's wing paid no heed, and dawn was smiling with gray hair. On the branches their dew gleamed like pearls, touched gently by the zephyr and then falling. The pool was like a page read by the birds, written by wind, with clouds as punctuation. Shams al-Din halted in the Maidan al-Hassa, where he pitched his tents, telling his servants that they would rest there for 2 days. For their part, they then went into the city to do as they pleased, one selling, one buying, one going to the baths and another to the Umayyad mosque, whose like is to be found nowhere in the world. Ajib went out accompanied by a eunuch, and they entered the city to look at the sights, with the eunuch walking behind holding a cudgel so heavy that were he to use it to strike a camel, the beast would never rise again. The people of Damascus looked at Ajib, his well-formed figure, his splendor and his beauty, for he was a remarkably handsome boy with soft manners, more delicate than the northern breeze, sweeter than cold water to the thirsty man and more delightful than the recovery of health to the sick. As a result, he was followed by a large crowd, some running behind him and others going on ahead and sitting in the road looking at him as he passed. This went on until, as had been decreed by fate, the eunuch stopped at the shop of his father Hassan. In the 12 years that he had spent in Damascus, Hassan's beard had grown long, and he had matured in intelligence. The cook had died, and he had taken over his wealth and his shop, having been acknowledged before the judges and the notaries as his son. When Ajib and the eunuch halted by his shop that day, Hassan looked at Ajib, his son, and taking note of how extremely handsome he was, his heart beat fast, blood sensed the pull of blood, and he felt linked to the boy by affection. He happened to have cooked a dish of sugared pomegranate seeds, and as God had inspired him with love for his son, he called out to him, "My master, who has taken possession of my heart, and for whom I yearn, would you enter my shop, mend my broken heart, and eat of my food?" Then, spontaneously, his eyes filled with tears and he thought of what he had been, and what he now was. As for Ajib, when he heard what his father had said, he felt drawn to him. He told this to the eunuch, adding, "It is as though this cook is a man who has parted from his son. Let us go into his shop, so that we may comfort him and eat what he gives us as guests. It may be that, if I do this for him, God may unite me with my father." "A fine thing, by God!" exclaimed the eunuch when he heard this. "Do viziers' sons stay eating in a cookshop? I use this stick to keep people away from you lest they even look at you, and I shall never feel safe in letting you go in here." When Hassan heard this, he was astonished and turned to the eunuch with tears running down his cheeks, while Ajib said, "My heart is filled with love for this man." "Don't say that," the eunuch replied, "for you are never going in there." Hassan himself then turned to the eunuch and said, "Great one, why do you not mend my broken heart by entering my shop yourself, you who are like a chestnut, dark but with a white heart, you who fit the description of the poet?" "What is this you say?" said the eunuch, laughing. "Produce the description, but keep it short." So Hassan started to recite these lines. Were he not educated and reliable, he would hold no office in the royal palace or be given charge of the harem. Oh, what a servant, who, for his beauty, heavenly angels serve. The eunuch was filled with admiration when he heard this, and taking Ajib with him, he entered the shop. Hassan then ladled into a bowl an excellent mixture of pomegranate seeds, almonds and sugar, and they both ate after Hassan had welcomed them, saying, "You have done me a favor, so enjoy your meal." Ajib then said to his father, "Sit and eat with us, and it may be that God will bring us together with those whom we wish to meet." "My boy," said Hassan, "have you, young as you are, had to suffer the loss of dear ones?" "Yes, uncle," replied Ajib. "This has caused me bitter distress, and the one whom I have lost is my father. My grandfather and I have come to search for him through all the lands, and I am filled with sad longing for him." He then wept bitterly, and his father wept because of his loss and because of the boy's tears, remembering the loss of his own loved ones and his separation from his father and his mother, while the eunuch shared his sorrow. They then ate their fill, after which the two got up, and when they left the shop, Hassan felt as though his soul had parted from his body and gone with them. He could not endure to be parted from them for the blink of an eye, and so he locked up his shop and followed, without realizing that Ajib was his son. He hurried on until he caught up with them before they had gone out of the main gate. The eunuch turned and asked what he wanted. "When you left my shop," replied Hassan, "I felt that my soul had gone with you, and, as I have an errand in the suburbs outside the gate, I wanted to go with you, do my errand, and then go back." The eunuch was angry. "This is what I was afraid of," he told Ajib. "The bite that we had to eat was unfortunate in that it has put us under an obligation, and here is that fellow following us from place to place." Ajib turned, and finding Hassan walking behind him, he became angry and his face flushed red. To the eunuch he said, "Let him walk on the public road, but if, when we come out to our tents, we find that he is still following us, then we can drive him away." He then lowered his head and walked on, with the eunuch behind him and Hassan trailing them, as far as the Maidan al-Hassa. When they were close to the tents, they turned and saw him still behind them. Ajib was afraid that the eunuch might tell his grandfather, and he became very angry for fear lest he be reported as having entered the cookshop and having been followed by the cook. So he turned and found Hassan's eyes fixed on his, while Hassan himself looked like a body without a soul. To Ajib it seemed as though his eyes were those of a pervert or that he was a debauchee, and so, in a fit of rage, he took a stone and hit his father with it, knocking him unconscious, with the blood running down over his face. He and the eunuch then went to the tents. When Hassan recovered consciousness, he wiped away the blood, and after cutting off a strip of his turban, he bandaged his head. He blamed himself and said, "I wronged the boy by shutting up my shop and following him, making him think that I was a pervert." So he went back to the shop and went on selling his food, but he started to yearn for his mother in Basra, and he recited in tears, "You wrong time if you ask it to be fair. Do not blame it, it was not created for fair dealing. Take what comes easily and leave care aside. Time must contain both trouble and happiness." He carried on with his business, while his uncle, Shams al-Din, after spending 3 days in Damascus, left for Homs, which he entered, and while he was on his journey he made inquiries wherever he went. He went to Diyar Bakr, Mardin and Mosul, and he kept on traveling until he reached Basra. After entering the city and settling himself there, he went to the Sultan. When they met, the Sultan treated him with respect and honor, and asked him the reason for his visit. Shams al-Din told him his story and that his brother was Nur al-Din Ali. "May God have mercy on him," interjected the Sultan, adding, "He was my vizier and I loved him dearly, but he died 15 years ago. He left a son, but the son only stayed for a month after his death before going missing, and we have never heard any more news of him, although his mother, the daughter of my old vizier, is still with us." When Shams al-Din heard that the mother of his nephew was well, he was delighted and told the Sultan that he would like to meet her. Permission was immediately granted and he went to visit her in his brother's house. He let his gaze wander around it, and kissing its threshold, he thought of his brother, and of how he had died in exile. So he shed tears and recited these lines: "I passed by the dwellings of Layla, and I kiss first one wall and then another. It is not love for the dwellings that wounds my heart, but love for the one who lived in them. He passed through the door into a large hall where there was another door, arched and vaulted with flint inset with marble of different kinds and different colors. He walked through the house, and as he looked at it and glanced around, he found the name of his brother inscribed in letters of gold. He went up to the inscription, kissed it, and wept as he remembered his separation from his brother. He then recited these lines. Every time it rises, I ask the sun for news of you, and I question the lightning about you when it flashes. Longing folds and unfolds me in its hands all night, but I do not complain of pain. Dear ones, for long, after you went, separation from you has left me cut to pieces. Were you to grant my eyes a sight of you, it would be better still if we could meet. Do not think I am busied with another, my heart has no room for another love. He then walked on until he reached the room of his brother's widow, the mother of Hassan, who throughout her son's disappearance had been weeping and wailing constantly, night and day. When long years had passed, she had made a marble cenotaph for him in the middle of the hall, where she would shed tears, and it was only beside this that she would sleep. When Shams al-Din came to her room, he heard the sound of her voice, and standing behind the door, he listened to her reciting. In God's name, grave, are his beauties now gone, and has that bright face changed? Grave, you are either a garden nor a sky, so how do you contain both branch and moon? While she was reciting this, Shams al-Din came in. He greeted her and told her that he was her husband's brother, and he then explained what had happened, giving her the full story, that her son Hassan had spent a whole night with his daughter 10 years earlier, and had then disappeared at dawn. He left my daughter pregnant, Shams al-Din added, and she gave birth to a son who is here with me, and he is your grandson, the son of your son by my daughter. When she looked at her brother-in-law and heard the news that her son was still alive, she got up and threw herself at his feet, kissing them and reciting, How excellent is the man who brings good tidings of your coming. He has brought with him the most delightful news. Were he to be contented with a rag, I would give him a heart that was torn in pieces when you said goodbye. Shams al-Din then sent a message telling Ajib to come, and when he did, his grandmother got up, embraced him and wept. This is no time for tears, Shams al-Din told her. This is the time for you to make your preparations to travel with us to Egypt, and perhaps God will allow us and you to join your son, my nephew. She agreed to leave and instantly got up to collect what she needed, together with her treasures and her maids. As soon as she was ready, Shams al-Din went to the Sultan of Basra and took leave of him, while the Sultan, in his turn, sent gifts and presents with him to take to the Sultan of Egypt. Shams al-Din then left immediately and traveled to Damascus, where he halted and pitched camp at Al-Qanan. He told his entourage that they would stay there for a week so that they could buy gifts for the Sultan. Ajib went out, telling his servant, Laik, that he wanted to look around the place, adding, Come with me and we shall go down to the market and pass through the city to see what has happened to that cook whose food we ate and whose head I hurt. He had been kind to me and I harmed him. Laik agreed and the two of them left the camp, Ajib being drawn to his father by the ties of kinship. After entering the city, they went on until they came to the cookshop, where they found Hassan. It was close to the time of the afternoon prayer and, as luck would have it, he had cooked a dish of pomegranate seeds. When they approached him, Ajib looked at him with a feeling of affection, while noting the scar on his forehead left by the blow from the stone. He greeted Hassan affectionately, while, for his part, Hassan was agitated, his heart fluttered, he hung his head towards the ground and he tried without success to move his tongue around his mouth. Then looking up at his son, with meekness and humility he recited these lines. I wished for my beloved, but when he came in sight, in my bewilderment I could not control tongue or eyes. I bowed my head in reverence and respect. I tried to hide my feelings, but in vain. I had whole reams of blame to give to him, but when we met I could not speak a word. Then he said to Ajib, Mend my broken heart, and eat of my food. By God, when I look at you, my heart races, and it was only because I had lost my wits that I followed you. You must indeed be fond of me. I took a bite to eat with you, after which you followed me, wanting to bring shame on me. I shall only eat your food on condition that you swear not to come out after me or follow me again, for otherwise I shall never come back here, although we are staying for a week so that my grandfather can buy gifts for the Sultan." Hassan agreed, and Ajib entered with his servant. Hassan presented them with a bowl of pomegranate seeds, and Ajib asked him to give them the pleasure of eating with him. He accepted gladly, but as his heart and body were concentrated on Ajib, he kept staring fixedly at his face. Ajib objected, saying, "Didn't I tell you that you are an unwelcome lover, so stop staring at my face." When Hassan heard what his son said, he recited these lines: "You have a hidden secret in men's hearts, folded away, concealed and not spread out. Your beauty puts to shame the gleaming moon, while your grace is that of the breaking dawn. The radiance of your face holds unfulfillable desires, whose well-known feelings grow and multiply. Am I to melt with heat, when your face is my paradise, and shall I die of thirst when your saliva is Kauthar?" Hassan kept filling Ajib's plate, and then that of the eunuch. They ate their fill and then got up. Hassan rose himself and poured water over their hands, after which he unfastened a silk towel from his waist on which he dried their hands before sprinkling them with rosewater from a flask that he had with him. Then he left his shop and came back with a jug of sherbet mixed with musk-flavored rosewater, which he presented to them, saying, "Complete your kindness." Ajib took it and drank, after which he passed it to the eunuch. They then drank from it in turns until their stomachs were full, as they had had more than usual. After leaving, they hurried back to their camp, where Ajib went to see his grandmother. She kissed him, and then, thinking of her son, she sighed, shed tears and recited, "I hoped that we might meet, and after losing you, there was nothing for me to wish for in my life. I swear that there is nothing in my heart except your love, and God, my Lord, knows every secret thing." She then asked Ajib where he had been, to which he replied that he had gone into the city of Damascus. She got up and brought him a bowl of pomegranate seeds that had only been sweetened a little, and she told the eunuch to sit down with his master. "By God," said the eunuch to himself, "I have no urge to eat," but he sat down. As for Ajib, when he took his seat, his stomach was full of what he had already eaten and drunk, but he took a morsel, dipped it among the pomegranate seeds and ate it. Because he was full, he found it undersweetened, and he exclaimed, "Ugh, what is this nasty food?" "My son," said his grandmother, "are you blaming my cooking? I cooked this myself, and no one can cook as well as I can, except for your father Hassan." "By God, grandmother," replied Ajib, "this dish of yours is disgusting. We have just come across a cook in the city who cooked a dish of pomegranate seeds whose smell would open up your heart. His food makes one want to eat again, while, in comparison, yours is neither one thing nor another." On hearing this, his grandmother became very angry and, looking at the eunuch, morning now dawned and Shahrazad broke off from what she had been allowed to say.